New Queen revelation exposes Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Prince Harry and the Queen adored each other, but a decision he made just before her death is cast in a new light after her secret was revealed over the weekend. On March 29 this year, the world let out a collective gasp followed by a very loud "What the dickens?" followed by a resigned sigh when Queen Elizabeth appeared at Westminster Abbey with Prince Andrew by her side at the memorial service for Prince Philip. Within minutes, literally, Andrew's self-appointed starring role in the service, fresh off having paid a reported $20 million plus to put an end to a civil sex abuse case, set off a media firestorm. What was largely ignored in the days afterwards, as reams of frustrated invective flowed forth from the keyboards of every opinion writer with an interest in the House of Windsor and passable Wi-Fi, was another story: the conspicuous absence of Philip's grandson Prince Harry at the service. At another time, Harry's non-attendance would have been a big story, but instead was largely passed over in the face of the extraordinary display of Uncle Andrew's blimp-sized ego and Her Majesty's quiescence to her useless son. But that moment, that while the royal family celebrated the life and work of the Philip, Harry was 8,500 kilometers away, and that subsequently the Duke only made 2 brief trips to the UK this year, have been cast in a new light after the Mail published extracts from royal insider Giles Brandreth's new book Elizabeth, an intimate portrait. Brandreth, who was friends with Philip, socialized with Queen Elizabeth and had Queen Camilla on his podcast, has revealed that he had heard that Her Majesty had a form of bone marrow cancer called myeloma and that Her Majesty always knew that her remaining time was limited. It's worth noting here that more than 24 hours after the Elizabeth extracts hit the internet, Buckingham Palace has yet to dispute Brandreth's claim. The palace has not been shy when faced with a cancer report in the past. In 2008, when the Evening Standard reported that Philip had prostate cancer, he went straight to the Press Complaints Commission. The exact timeline here is pretty opaque. While it is not known when the nonagenarian workhorse might have been diagnosed, it was in October last year that she was secretly admitted to hospital overnight and then pulled out a series of high-profile events, including appearing at the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow and attending the events at the Cenotaph for Remembrance Day. By the time 2022 rolled around, Her Majesty's advanced years seemed to be catching up with her, having started using a walking stick. In May, Queen Elizabeth, for the first time in nearly 60 years, withdrew from the state opening of Parliament, deputizing the then Prince of Wales and the Duke of Cambridge to take her place. Clearly all was not well behind the walls of Windsor Castle, where Her Majesty had decamped in 2020 when the pandemic hit. So, if we assume then that Brandreth's claim is correct, that means that at some point this year at least, the Queen was diagnosed with cancer, the same year that Harry and wife Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, have spent no more than a week back in Britain. In April, the Sussexes made their first joint visit back to Blighty, post-Megxit, popping in on their way to the Invictus Games in The Hague. Several days later, Harry sat opposite Hoda Kotb, the host of the American Today Show, and explained he had wanted to go and see his grandmother to make sure she's protected and she's got the right people around her. The implication of that comment, that Her Majesty might not be protected and that she might have the wrong people around her, rubbed many the wrong way in the UK and went down about as well as Philip being tasked with opening a university's gender studies wing. Then in early June, the late Queen's Platinum Jubilee rolled around and Harry and Meghan, this time with their young son and daughter in tow too, flew back to the UK again. They stayed only 5 days, reportedly, avoided a family lunch with royal cousins, according to the Telegraph, and were said to have turned down an invitation to the party at the palace. On the final day of the Jubilee celebrations, they reportedly flew out of the UK, the same day that Her Majesty took to the Buckingham Palace balcony for what would be the last time. During the stay, the Queen was introduced to the Sussexes' daughter, her namesake Lilibet. However, she, per the Telegraph, personally intervened to prevent an official image being taken. By the time the northern summer rolled around, it was etched in stone given that the Queen would make her usual passage north to hole up on her Balmoral estate to wear all the tartan she could find and to spend time with her family. In late July, The Sun said that she had extended an invitation to Harry and Meghan, though a few days later, Page 6 pushed back against this, saying they had not in fact been asked to stay. At some point in August, the Queen held a wonderful, extended stay for her grandchildren and great-children, which was a big sleepover at Balmoral. Royal biographer Katie Nicholl, to which the Sussexes were reportedly invited. Still, Harry and Meghan stayed in California, where he played polo. Also at the time, the Duchess' first print interview in 5 years was released and contained lines which could be read as carrying with them a certain implied threat, including Meghan saying, "I've never had to sign anything that restricts me from talking, and I have a lot to say until I don't." In the same piece, she casually mentioned she had found a journal from her brief royal years while the family was back staying in the UK for the Jubilee. Yet by this point concerns about Her Majesty's health were reportedly known, according to Elizabeth. As Dr. Douglas Glass, who had been the Queen's local Balmoral GP for more than 30 years, told Brandreth, "We have been concerned about the Queen's health for several months. Her death was expected and we were quite aware of what was going to happen." By the time that summer was drawing to close, Harry and Meghan had not spent any time away from prying eyes with the Queen at her favorite retreat. Now the big caveat here is that bodyguard issue. Last year, the Duke launched a legal claim seeking a judicial review over the decision for the removal of the Sussexes' official security after they stepped back from royal duties. In January, a legal representative for the Duke said that he was unable to return to his home because with the lack of police protection comes too great a personal risk. The Sussexes returned to the UK to attend the One Young World Summit in early September, but the Telegraph reported that they would miss seeing the Queen during that trip because the security dispute had not been ironed out. She would pass away while the Duke and Duchess were back in Britain. So, the Sussexes could go to a charity event in a Manchester arena but couldn't go to Balmoral, where they would have been tucked inside what would have to be one of the biggest security cordons in the world. Queen at her favorite retreat. Now the big caveat here is that bodyguard issue. Last year, the Duke launched a legal claim seeking a judicial review over the decision for the removal of the Sussexes' official security after they stepped back from royal duties. In January, a legal representative for the Duke said that he was unable to return to his home because with the lack of police protection comes too great a personal risk. The Sussexes returned to the UK to attend the One Young World Summit in early September, but the Telegraph reported that they would miss seeing the Queen during that trip because the security dispute had not been ironed out. She would pass away while the Duke and Duchess were back in Britain. So, the Sussexes could go to a charity event in a Manchester arena but couldn't go to Balmoral, where they would have been tucked inside what would have to be one of the biggest security cordons in the world.